Hi there folks, today we're going to talk about the improved matchmaker that is coming to us in update 9.20.1. Have you ever played Himmelsdorf against a team that has more heavies than you? Or perhaps you've watched victory slip from your fingers on an open map simply because the other camp was lucky enough to have more medium tanks in their ranks? Update 9.20.1 clamps down on these frustrating scenarios by adding an extra parameter to the matchmaker: vehicle combat roles. Simply put, we taught the matchmaker to see the difference between the mouse and the IS-7, for example. Now it balances them separately. To create two evenly assembled teams, it would place the former against other heavily armored tanks, so the mouse against the E100 or the Type 5 Heavy, etc. While the IS-7 gets to face the T110E5 and the FV215B. Let's take a closer look. So, how does this work? Along with balancing teams by vehicle classes, artillery, light tanks and tank destroyers, and platoons, the matchmaker now looks into the intended roles each tank plays in combat and ensures each side has a similar number of vehicles that play the same role. Of course, their exact number might differ, but this difference is one vehicle at the most. Of course, this last sentence, that's just Wargaming making a strong case for themselves. If it's the case that the other team has one or two tanks more, with this sentence, Wargaming already says that it's normal. Okay, further, if you need a refresher on how the matchmaker works, read here. We all know the refresher, we all know how the matchmaker works. That started with update 9.18, of course. In my personal opinion, that was a great update and a great change to the matchmaker. Unfortunately, with update 9.19, we got already smaller or little tweaks to the matchmaker, and that broke the matchmaker completely, especially on tier 8 and above. Okay, so this article was a reminder, is a reminder of how the matchmaker works. The 3 level battles, 3 top tiers, 5 middle tiers, 7 bottom tiers, both sides of course, or the 2 levels, 5 top tiers and 10 middle tiers or bottom tiers in this case, and the 1 level battle is the 1 tier only battles. Let's hope that with these improvements to the matchmaker, also the tier 8 problems and above are solved. But I don't think so, to be frankly honest, because Wargaming never mentioned in this article, we are going to read it further, they never mentioned the problems at tier 8. So let's have a further look. Essentially, the newly added parameter balances out the number of autoloaders, well-protected TDs and assault heavy tanks across teams. By distributing them evenly between the two camps, the improved matchmaker addresses another frequent concern of yours. Medium and heavy tanks are no longer distributed randomly. With classes split into smaller groups that unite vehicles with a distinct playstyle, medium tanks with a certain role are pitted against each other. The same with heavies. So you can forget about one-sided matchups with, let's say, 5 badgeheads ducking it out with 5 mouses on steps, for instance. So we put in extra effort to make sure balancing by a vehicle's role does not affect the overall speed of matching. So worry not, the wait time won't change. What should improve is the overall variety of matches, as vehicle rolls lower the chance of a team gaining the upper hand through sheer luck. At the same time, team setups aren't mirrored, so every battle is a unique experience where the final outcome depends largely on tactics and team play. Finally, the matchmaker tries to ensure teams are evenly assembled regarding the number of platoons, players, and their vehicle tiers, its primary goal. However, it currently doesn't balance platoon vehicles by roles. Instead, it evens out the matchups by adding standalone vehicles to teams. If the current queue composition allows for it with no increase in the wait time. For example, if a team has a platoon of autoloader medium tanks, the matchmaker places it against a platoon of medium tanks. Then it tries to add standalone autoloader tanks to the other team to even out their chances at victory. If there are no autoloaders in the queue, it will create a battle to avoid longer wait times. So this last sentence again is Wargaming placing themselves in a strong position, telling us that if the teams aren't divided evenly, it is all normal, because they don't want us to wait any longer to go into a battle. Now about the vehicle roles. If you look at the way light tanks and RD fight, tank destroyer, medium and heavy tanks are all a story. Let's take medium tanks with powerful guns and moderate armor for example. These are designated support vehicles. Their peers with strong protection but average mobility and firepower perform best in an attack role. There's a whole bunch of medium tanks sporting autoloader guns, and they can dismantle an enemy in no time. Finally, others perform equally well in more than one role, which makes them fairly universal. Having analyzed the key parameters and combat performance of tank destroyers, medium and heavy tanks, we outlined primary roles for each class at tier 8 until tier 10. So basically what Wargaming is telling us is that in the improved Matchmaker in 9.20.1, an extra parameter will be taken into account in order to give us a battle with two teams who are divided in the same way with the same type of vehicles. Not only the same type of vehicles, but also the same role for that vehicle. Now, Wargaming also tells us that the light tanks and the SPGs aren't divided into separate groups, because those vehicles only have one role. Obvious, the scout tanks, the light tanks are scout tanks, so scouting the only role, and the SPGs are long-range support vehicles. But the medium tanks and heavy tanks and tank destroyers are divided into smaller separate groups, and the matchmaker will take those groups into account. So we start with the medium tanks. Wargaming only made these roles happen for tier 8, tier 9 and tier 10 vehicles. So for medium tanks we have a lot of those in the game. We have 4 groups for each tier. So tier 8 has 4 different groups. So each group represents a separate role for that vehicle. The matchmaker will make it happen that both teams have the same role vehicles and equal an equal amount of those vehicles. So for instance, let's have a look to what Wargaming gave us here. On tier 8 we have 4 groups. In group 1 we have the Object 416, the Indian Panzer, the Panzer 58 Mats, and so on. Those are all 8 vehicles here in this group. Have all the same role, have all the same play style in battle. At least that is what Wargaming is telling us right now. So if there is an Object 416 in your team, then in the other team there will be another vehicle or the same vehicle from this group. So there will be an Object 416 in the enemy's team, or an Indian Panzer, or an Panzer 58 Mats, or an STA-1. If in your group there's a Lorraine 40T in your team, then in the other team there will be also a Lorraine 40T or a T69, because those are 2 autoloaders. If in your group, in your team, there's a Super Pershing, then in the other team there will be also a Super Pershing or a T54 first prototype or a Primo Victoria or a Centurion MK1. If in your group there is an STG or an STG Guard, then in the other team there will also be from this group. So also an STG or an STG Guard or another tank in this group, mentioned in this group here. And the same goes for tier 9s. So if there's a Leopard prototype A in your team, then in the other team there will also be a Leopard prototype A or a Type 61 or an AMX 30. If in your team there's a T54E1, then in the other team there will be at least also a T54E1 or a Batchat 25T TAP or a Skoda T50, and so on. The same goes for T10. If in your team there's a Batchat 25T, and in the other team there will also be a Batchat 25T, or there will be a TVP T50-51. And we have the same thing going on for the heavy tanks, and even for the tank destroyers. So all of these vehicles are divided in separate groups, and if there's a vehicle of one particular group in your team, then there will be a vehicle of the same group in the other team. If there are 2 vehicles of a particular group in your team, then in the other team there will be 2 vehicles of the same group. Simply put, if there's a vehicle or more vehicles from one group in your team, there will be an equal amount of vehicles of the same group vehicles in the other team. So that's the extra parameter Wargaming put in the Matchmaker, starting from update 9.20.1. Now the question is, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? We have to wait. We have to wait and see. If the game goes live on the 18th of October, then we will have to see and test it out. Wait, there's more improvements to the Matchmaker. Don't end up with the introduction of vehicle roles. Along with adding them, we addressed some of your most vocal requests. Better chances of getting ranked at the top of the list for platoon players. Let's first read what Wargaming is telling us. Initially, their chances of playing at the top, for platoon players that is, were reduced to avoid upsetting scenarios with platoons single-handedly deciding the battle outcome. So what Wargaming is telling here is the fact that if there are only platoons at the top of the playlist, then the outcome of the battle mostly is decided by those platoons. That is why they didn't encourage platoons on top of the player list. Now they will. In direct response to community feedback, we're raising them slightly so that you and your platoon mates can fight at higher tiers once in a while. This won't cause any drastic changes to the state of random battles, but offers a more varied experience to platoon players. So basically what Wargaming is telling us here is that the chance you have as a platoon to be on top of the list will be bigger than it is right now. Equal chances of getting ranked in the top, middle, bottom of the list for different vehicle classes. You might have noticed that heavy and medium tanks would end up in single level battles way too often, while RTNTDs tended to get +2 and +1 setups. We tweaked the matchmaker, evening out the odds for all vehicle classes. I optimized team assembly logic. After some extra tuning, you'll see more 3, 5, 7 and 5, 10 teams, which should provide for a more enjoyable experience. Okay, you'll see more 3, 5 and 7 battles. Okay, let's just say that the whole point of the new matchmaker started from 9.18 was to have a lot of 3, 5, 7 pattern battles. Okay. Stating this, Wargaming is acknowledging that there is a problem with 3, 5 and 7 pattern battles. So now we will have more of them, so battles with 3 tiers and battle with 2 tiers. Okay. And this is good thing. The last thing is good thing, in my personal opinion. More grand battles. So we increased the chance of getting matched in grand battles so that more players could playtest the new format. That is a good thing. Firstly, I'm not a real tier 10 player. I don't play tier 10 very often. But if I play tier 10, I want to end up in grand battle mode. But lately, I never ended up in a grand battle mode. Never, never, never. So, Wargaming raising the chance of getting matched in a grand battle mode is a good thing. I do like the grand battle mode. So yeah, when I read all this, the extra parameter to the matchmaker is a good thing. If this will work according to what Wargaming is stating here, it is a good thing. It will be a good thing. The teams will be more balanced this way. But the big question is, will it work? Again, we have to wait 5 more days and the update 9.20.1 will go live on the main battle servers. So in 5 days we will know if this whole new system will work.